Hey, I'm Yordan Dimitrov, and this is SEO in 2025 Additional Insights.
Jordan, what's your additional insight for SEO in 2025?
My additional insight is to adapt to AI search trends with a strong brand authority. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is because I feel that now more than ever, brand authority is what will allow businesses to differentiate from others. And it's about positioning themselves in the right space and in the right time, and to be front of mind across all platforms, not just search.
Okay, so you started off by talking about the importance of adapting to search trends, AI search trends. So what AI search trends specifically are you referring to?
So I'm referring to the rise of Google AI overview as a new way of displaying results, as well as different search platforms. So now we've had ChatGPT search, we've had Perplexity enter the market, and based on recent data from that counter, Google has actually reduced some of its market share globally. So now it's down to 90%, which is the lowest it's been for 15 years. And the actual industry is changing in terms of where people are searching.
So we'll get into how to build a stronger brand that's more appropriate for AI search just in a second there. But with regards to AI search trends, how do you actually stay on top of which trend is more important for your business?
So personally, I follow a lot of the news outlets which are out there, and I also keep on top of any email newsletters which are out there. So SEO FOMO, for example, is a really key one that I keep on top of to give me up-to-date information as to what is happening within the industry right now. And from a brand perspective, for businesses, I'd say that they should work closely with their agency or with their freelancer or their person in-house to keep on top of things. But at the end of the day, it is the role of that professional who they've hired to support them.
Okay, so shout out to Aleda Solis who runs that particular newsletter. So that's a good way. But there's so much happening. How do you actually determine what is just noise and what is important to listen to?
And the way I personally look at it is I check if it's something that has been announced officially by Google/Alphabet on their blog. Alternatively, if it's a lot of noise, like you said, I would actually double check that multiple sources are talking about the same kind of issue appearing or the same kind of opportunity, and then take it from there.
Okay. Okay, so brand authority in the age of AI search. What's different about that compared with maybe brand authority 5 years ago?
I feel that the landscape of SERP has changed. So we no longer have, the blue links and that's it. The real estate on SERP has changed significantly to the point where what you thought, okay, I'm guaranteed, let's say, position one, and I've kept on top of it for a number of years. Now, Google could change everything and try and make it customizable based on your previous searches to be able to create a more custom result whereby they're giving you, let's say, results which are in top 12. So I saw that there was a research done by Spotify and DemandSphere where they had mentioned that 75% of links cited in Google AI overview come from the top 12 organic results. Therefore, even though, let's say, you're position one, now Google AI overview will come on top of that, therefore push you down in terms of SERP.
Got you. Okay, so you're positioning brand authority, you're describing brand authority as being involved within the AI overviews and other AI driven results.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and if that's the case, then what do you need to do as a brand in order to actually appear there?
So as a brand, you need to optimize as well as best as you can. So implement things like Schema, make sure that you follow best practices in terms of your technical SEO where possible. You need to make sure that you enhance trust signals. So focus on things like EAT, look at expert-driven content. So depending on your niche, try and get people to come in and give their opinions or be part of your content strategy. You could use additional trust signals like having credibility on third-party platforms like TripAdvisor, like Trustpilot, or Yelp, for example, for the US, because Yelp is linked to Apple Maps. You could focus on adapting an omni-channel approach where you don't just focus on search, but you also look at socials, PR, etc., to ensure that you have a consistent brand messaging and brand authority. And you could also look at citation of NAP to kind of support that, whereby everything is having the same kind of name, address, phone number, etc.
Sorry, what was the last one there? It's a citation of maps as an appearing in Google.
Yeah, citation of NAP, citation of name, address, and phone number.
Got you. Okay. Okay, brilliant. Okay, and did you have anything else to add there? I went to some list already.
Yes, the other one I wanted to add as part of the omni-channel is TV advertising. So one of my clients did TV advertising, and we found that that had a very positive domino effect across the remaining channels. So when they were running TV ads, our click-through rate was naturally much better for organic, especially for branded terms.
Interesting. Okay, so obviously it's more important to work more closely with other channels, perhaps more traditional channels like TV, as you say. How can an SEO do that? How can they better structure perhaps their landing pages, their titles, encourage more click-through rates, perhaps work with paid search team in order to maximize that brand uplift from a TV campaign?
In my opinion, it's about cross-team collaboration. So being involved in those discussions early on when a TV campaign is being planned in. So I've seen a couple of TV campaigns even prompt users to say, search for X, and then you make sure that you optimize your landing page to include those specific terms so that when people actually search on Google, Bing, etc., you're coming up on the top as the brand that they've seen on TV. And being involved in those discussions by talking to both PPC, PR, etc., would ensure that there is a joint strategy that everyone is working towards. And then you need to put the necessary measures in place to monitor that traffic, which I think we'll probably go into.
So how do you measure brand authority in the age of AI?
So there are multiple ways to do that. One of the, I guess, easiest way to do it is through using the Google Search Console, as well as through visualizing that data with the use of Looker Studio reports. So the way I personally did it was I used regular expressions or regex to identify what the branded terms are, if there are any slogans that we're trying to focus on. And then I copied that and made like a note of it on the side. And then I was using regex to filter my data within Search Console for me to analyze it. And then as part of Looker Studio as functionality, I also added that to some of the backend of the Looker Studio to be able to visualize that data and show the client, okay, year on year or quarter on quarter, this is the results which we have achieved following our efforts and the additional, let's say, investment put into SEO, into PR, into TV advertising, etc., as well as breaking down those channels individually so that we could see where the impact was felt.
And what metrics specifically are you looking for here? Because you can certainly measure brand uplift in terms of increased search traffic for the brand, but are you also going deeper down into the funnel here and seeing what impact that traffic has?
So the example which I was thinking of was in relation to memberships for the client that I worked with. And we looked at how many memberships they were able to basically secure on the back of the TV advertising that they run. Therefore, it was that conversion in terms of bottom of the funnel as a result of the clicks which were generated from organic or other channels to be able to provide that reporting, as well as the time spent on page, which I think is still a metric that we should consider. I know that GA4 deprioritized bounce rate, but some people argue that it's something that we need to also be mindful of.
I'd just like to dig into a couple of areas that you've already highlighted there. Name, address, and phone number. Where is it important for that information to appear on? And I guess what you're looking for is to ensure that everything's consistent across different platforms.
Correct. So you would be looking at various platforms or directories out there. So, starting off with the easiest ones that you could pick up and that everyone, in my opinion, should start from is Google Business Profile, Bing Places, Apple Maps, which is linked to Yelp. Then going into any local directories. So if there is anything specific to the location where that business is based. Alternatively, if it's also like a bigger size business, you could look at any directories which are focusing on that specific niche or market, so that you could make sure that all that data is consistent, so that when a user, for example, looks up that brand within Perplexity, all the results are pointing to the same source and referencing the same information and ensuring that credibility. So again, take into account things like domain authority and building that out with quality backlinks from relevant sources.
And you also mentioned experts-driven content. Ideally, are you talking about internal experts that are within your organization, or does it not matter? Can it be experts from your industry as well? And also, what's the best way to actually demonstrate to Google that it is a particular expert that has been used and harness their credibility?
So when it comes to experts, it needs to be someone who is actually got a lot of, let's say, articles and has been, for example, featured across different websites or has already existing credibility. I feel that in-house experts are great up to a point, but if they are not actually known, it doesn't have the same weight as someone who has already established themselves. So, for example, earlier we talked about Aleida. If, for example, you invite Aleida as a guest speaker, Aleida would bring that additional credibility to your website and be a trusted source of information, unlike, say, someone internal who hasn't had the same exposure. And in terms of how to amplify that, I would say focusing on author schema and implementing that. And for example, if a person publishes multiple articles for you, you could have an author page where all of their content could be featured.
Okay, and author schema can obviously be used for blog posts. How about if someone appears as a guest on a podcast, for example, or a webinar? Is that still a legitimate use of author schema then?
I feel like yes, because you would then be referencing them, and similar to how citations of an AP works, you'll be giving them a backlink, and then they would most likely, depending on their approach, will backlink from you and like feature you on their socials, etc. And that helps everything be interconnected.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
If they're struggling for time, I think that they should focus on how to begin measuring brand and analyzing what can they do to improve that. So as I mentioned, look at your branded traffic versus non-branded traffic, and then think, okay, if we, for example, content prone, or if we make some changes to our strategy as a team through omni-channel marketing, how can we improve our brand performance and drive it further to be able to grow?
Is it important to actually try to define the medium that has referred the traffic? Because if you're working for a big business and there's a TV campaign going on, there's a press campaign, there's some PR releases, there's a social media campaign as well, it's quite difficult to determine precisely which source has driven the traffic when it's just brand searches. You mentioned when you were talking about the TV campaign there to encourage people to search for a particular phrase. Is that one way to do it? And also, what are your general thoughts on how to determine which source has referred the brand traffic?
We are restricted to the cookie consent on a lot of cases. And recently, I know that Apple, for example, has been more strict in terms of the privacy. However, where possible, it would be ideal if we can identify which channel the user came from. because all of us are trying to prove concept of our channel. So for example, myself as an SEO, I'm always looking at organic and saying, okay, this is how many visitors we brought to your website. This is what we've done to improve it. Whereas the other channels would also be doing the same. And I feel like if we provide a breakdown, we know what is driving it, what's having the positive domino effect. And for example, when people are using a specific search term, we can see that term, which for example was never before used, because it's part of our new campaign, we could be like, okay, we launched the TV campaign. These are the results. This is how many people we've actually had land on the landing page rather than on the home page. And these are the results.
Yordan Dimitrov is an SEO manager, and you can find him over at yordan.bio.link. Yordan, thanks so much for adding your additional insight to SEO in 2025.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to Majestic.
I've been your host, David Bain, and you've been listening to SEO in 2025 Additional Insights, a Majestic series that complements the original podcast, video series, and book. Find out more at SEOin2025.com.